robots are never going to replace, or AI is never going to replace lawyers. Lawyers that know how to use robots will replace lawyers that don't.
Especially for junior lawyers that do a lot of research, AI can do so much research 1,000 times quicker.
And that was the first time I really got to see kind of the real world impact in a police cell, trying to get instructions from a 10-year-old because he hasn't got food on the table, he's starving, break in to steal a caramello koala and ends up spending the weekend in a prison cell. So
you see stuff like that on TV, you don't realise it's happening in real life.
It's very, at that point it was very obvious to me that if it wasn't in court, it was certainly, helping clients and advocating for people.
Do you recommend your career to a 16-year-old right now who's looking for a career to choose? Reece, welcome to the show.
Thanks, Anwar.
Thank you for taking time to come and join us for the podcast. Good to have you, man.
Pleasure. Thanks for having me here.
Having a good week so far?
It's been great, yeah. 2 weeks till Christmas, so counting down like everybody, I'm sure.
Excellent. Hey, I want to talk to you about your journey to become what you do right now. So introduce yourself to us. What's your title right now? What do you do? What's your job?
Yeah, sure. So the official title is partner at Clyde Co, a global law firm. But I've been called many things, and problem solver, breach coach, really there as a person that helps organisations out when things go a bit wrong, and hopefully a bit beforehand as well.
Okay. So you're a lawyer?
Yes.
A senior lawyer?
Yep.
For someone who doesn't understand the nuances of how it works in the law world, in a partnership environment and stuff, which we will come to that later.
Cool.
But you're a senior lawyer?
Yes.
Okay. So talk to me, if someone want to join the law industry, let's say a 16-year-old or a 12-year-old, as you just mentioned before. I mean, for you, when did you know the first time that you knew I want to become a lawyer?
So very early on, I'll probably start when I'm about 16 was when I really wanted to do it. But when I think about it, I actually realised it was actually quite much earlier than that. So probably about 12 years old. I think for me, it was, I'm not the biggest kid in the schoolyard, but for me, I realised my kind of superpower was being able to communicate, being able to advocate, whether it was your friend in trouble, or I've got 3 brothers, so, being able to hang out with them. And I think also not just the communication skills, the problem solving skills, and even the emotional intelligence, being able to spot the way in which people relate to each other and thinking, hang on, there's something in this, working with people, and being able to get outcomes through that.
But what would you know about law for you to think I want to become a lawyer? What was it? Some TV show, or your dad, your cousin, your auntie? Why lawyer? How did you know, I would like to be a lawyer?
Yeah, I think for a lot of people, it probably starts with a TV show, or for me, reading To Kill a Mockingbird, or something in literature, something in the arts. I'm not a family of lawyers. My dad's a mechanic, or at least before he retired, he was a mechanic. My mum's a school teacher. So I think for me, education was instilled within me as a strong guiding force from my parents. How did I know I wanted to become a lawyer? I think when I think about role modelling, I had a teacher in year 8, year 9, so history and business studies, and she was explaining that, she was a lawyer in her former life, and I think that was the first exposure that I had to a lawyer. I've never met a lawyer before, I don't have anyone in the family, so for me that was probably where it started, and then really exploring, okay, well, what does that actually involve? And for me at school, talking about high school, I enjoyed getting into debating. I enjoyed getting into those extracurricular activities where you could, as I say, problem solve and try to work through those issues.
Okay. And you thought, now that you're a teenager, say 16 or so, and you say I want to become a lawyer, is it because arguing in court, for example, you see in crime shows, or it doesn't have to be a crime, but, lawyers arguing in court, and you feel, I like those kind of skills. I have them, but I also like them. I respect them. Those superpowers of being able to win an argument, or be clever, or be, someone applauds when they finish their speech. Is that how sort of you go, I like those superpowers? Is that how it started?
I think that's what people kind of see on TV, and they think, that's what I want to do. But, in truth, it's only a very small part of being a lawyer is, that advocacy piece. But
we're talking about what made you think these are the kind of skills I can be a lawyer. I like that person. I like this kind of person.
Yeah.
As a teenager.
Yeah.
Do you think that's how?
I think definitely, like, when you look at TV shows, that was, something that attracted me in the first instance. But even when you look at, 16 years old and you think, what do I want to do in my career? It's very, at that point, it was very obvious to me that if it wasn't in court, it was certainly, helping clients and advocating for people and trying to get them out of trouble or trying to get them into a better position. And, from a very early point, I knew I wanted to be a criminal lawyer, or at least that's where I thought I wanted to be when I started. And so a lot of my journey between kind of 16, finishing high school, my focus studies, what I really wanted to get into from a study perspective, it kind of really focused around that social justice piece.
Okay. And so for those that don't know, you've when you start to study law, so which university did you go to anyway?
Yeah, so actually it's an interesting story, and probably for your younger listeners, there's a story in this around resilience as well. So I did, okay at high school as you need to be able to get into university, but I definitely wasn't the top of the class, and so I actually started off at Western Sydney University, and then was there for 6 months, and ultimately then transitioned to Macquarie University. So I always wanted to end up there, but I kind of started at WSU initially.
Okay, and when you start, so do you need to decide whether you're going to be criminal or commercial from the very beginning, or how does it work?
You've got to do a minimum of what they call the priestly 11 or 11 basic subjects. It's all the stuff that covers basically every field of law. So property law, criminal law, contract law, constitutional law. So you've got to kind of do your core subjects, but then you get to choose the other kind of 15 subjects around that. And that's where you probably start to shape your real interests in where you want to at least start your career, because obviously everybody evolves throughout their career. But yeah, so you start with the foundations and then you kind of choose your interest subjects to then really focus in on from your studies perspective.
Okay. And so you started out and how did you then progress in your career? What's your first job? And did you end up doing your study finish as a criminal lawyer? How did you finish your study as?
Yeah, so I had a real interest in technology and privacy, and we'll come back to that in a moment because that's where I've kind of ended up. But I didn't start off there. So I knew I always wanted to be, or at least I thought I wanted to be a criminal lawyer. And so throughout my studies, I did quite a lot of volunteering with the Aboriginal Legal Service. So I actually was really fortunate. I made some really good contacts there and volunteered there. I would spend my Sundays down at Parramatta, or in fact out at Dubbo and Bathurst. I used to go out there and help volunteer and help get particularly young offenders in their bail applications. So trying to help them, give them free legal advice, free advocacy to actually, get them frankly out of jail and back home again.
That's amazing.
That was the first time I really got to see kind of the real world impacts of.
Was it rewarding?
Incredibly. I mean, very disappointing in a lot of ways to see the kind of breakdown of society and the fabric and all the rest of it, and all the institutional problems that come with policing.
Disappointing and rewarding.
But very rewarding. I think for me, that was the first time when you're, in a police cell trying to get instructions from a 10-year-old kid who had just been charged for breaking and entering into the school canteen because he hasn't got food on the table, he's starving, so he decides to go and break in to steal a caramello koala and ends up spending the weekend in a prison cell. So, yeah, really in-your-face stuff as a 22-year-old.
You see stuff like that on TV, you don't realise it's happening in real life.
Indeed. So, I kind of started my career still doing quite a lot of volunteer work with the Aboriginal Legal Service.
I didn't even know that. I respect you for that, man.
Yeah, no, thank you. But then ultimately found my way into a firm. I realised that for me to ultimately become my best and do my best and give back to the world, I really wanted to go somewhere that would challenge me intellectually, that would challenge me in areas that I didn't think I would wanting to do. And that's where I started my journey, a commercial lawyer at a firm called Norton Rose Fulbright. So they do lots of different stuff, but fundamentally helping, companies across all certain things. So did a bit of construction law, did a bit of insurance law, bit of insolvency law. So kind of, for me, the first 2 years of my apprenticeship, as it were, was really about foundational skill sets. So understanding, what does it actually mean behind the desk, behind the computer to be a lawyer? And I used those first 2 years to kind of get that real grounding in terms of how to write, how to articulate, how to deliver results, how to get things done within a certain time frame, within budgets, all that kind of stuff that you kind of need to be able to sharpen your pencils, as it were.
Yep. It's amazing. Okay. So this is your first, if you like, exposure to the commercial law, in a sense. Is commercial the right word to describe non-criminal?
Yeah,
Would you call them all commercial, company and corporate law and contract law, whatever you said, constitutional law. Would you call all of that commercial, or that's not the right word to
The
describe
easiest
it?
way to probably split up, I mean, like your profession, like any profession, once you kind of dig a bit deeper, you realize that, thousands of different career niches within the overall blanket or fabric that is practicing law. But the easiest way to describe it is it's probably family law, criminal law, and then commercial law. That kind of covers the field.
Okay, interesting. You mentioned institutional. I forgot about that as well. Where do you end up working if you're an institutional lawyer? Is it only with the government, or no, not necessarily, because you need lawyers that understand the Constitution to defend people even sometimes.
A lot of constitutional, and this is probably the pointy end of legal practice is, constitutional lawyers. I mean, they're fighting typically a range of different issues, social justice issues. So whether it's fighting the government for the robo-debt scheme and asking fundamentally, can the government actually do what they did with the robo-debt scheme under the powers with the Constitution? Or it could be dealing with issues in relation to migration. It could be dealing with issues in relation to taxation. So the real fundamentals of power of government and bureaucracy in daily life.
Yeah. Do you recommend your career to a 16-year-old right now who's looking for a career to choose?
Absolutely. I think like being a lawyer is incredibly rewarding. There's lots of upsides, there's lots of downsides, like any profession, but it's a very rewarding profession. It's a calling. You're ultimately there serving the court, serving the justice system, serving society. I think the biggest thing for a 16-year-old me, if I were to go back and tell myself this now, is the role of technology in the next 10 years is going to fundamentally replace quite a lot of the practice of law as it stands currently. So if you're a lawyer thinking that, I want to be a lawyer and do things how other people do it currently, that world is going to change completely over the next 10 years. We're probably going to see the most amount of disruption change to the way things have been done for hundreds of years in the next 10 years, more so than the past has ever happened.
Especially for, cut you off, especially for junior lawyers that do a lot of research. AI can do so much research 1,000 times quicker.
The best tip that I have, and even for young lawyers, people that want to get into law, is robots are never going to replace, or AI is never going to replace lawyers. Lawyers that know how to use robots will replace lawyers that don't. That's probably the best way to describe it. So I think actually in some respects, 16-year-old version of myself now probably has the upper hand in some ways, because very technology native, very comfortable with understanding the world around them through the lens of technology. I actually think the next generation is actually going to be probably some of the brightest and most impactful lawyers that our generation sees.
Okay. So AI in the legal industry. Where do you see it? Where would it make the biggest impact? And in terms of the impact on replacing certain jobs and skills and people, and therefore, what is the recommendation to lawyers out there, whether it's junior lawyers or senior lawyers? How would they adapt?
So I think firstly, not being scared of it and embracing it. I think there's often a resistance to change. So just opening your mind up to new ways of working. But I think the other area, to your point, I mean, we talk a lot about research, or I guess like any field, AI is going to replace the basic tasks that people do day to day. It could be research, it could be drafting. So having an AI bot or having some piece of technology, draft a letter of advice for you, it obviously needs data to be able to do that. So, feeding in previous advices or feeding in judgments from court proceedings or feeding in whatever the input is for it to then review that language model and then develop an output for your product. So my advice is understanding how the technology works, because it's not perfect. And in fact, as it stands currently, there's actually quite a lot of problems with it. So much so that actually the New South Wales Supreme Court recently, a few weeks ago, came out and said to all the barristers and the lawyers in New South Wales, you now have to declare if you're going to use AI to produce, say, evidence in court or use something, because we know that there's imperfections with the technology itself, and more to the point, there's imperfections with people's understanding of the limitations with the technology. Until that's cured, the court is saying you need to tread carefully. But I think to answer your question, the next generation is the challenge, but the opportunity is going to be able to understand how is this technology going to be enhanced and enhance the practice of law, and how do I actually learn that? Because that's, if I were to employ someone tomorrow, it would be saying, I don't personally understand this too much as I need to understand.
So the way, when I did some research about this topic, but not necessarily in across any job, not focused on legal jobs,
Sure.
across any industry, and the role of HR and leaders to be aware of that change and make sure they encourage AI. So when the change hits them, they are ready for that change. So they don't feel any competitive disadvantage against other competitors who adapted better than them.
Yep.
One of the things that I discovered is you cannot replace a person who's really good at finding the root cause of the problem. Someone comes to you at high level in what we do, no matter what our profession is. When we are problem solvers, we have a customer, a client, a person, someone that comes to us with a problem. Our job is to really unravel and dig deep into understanding really what is the problem. What is the root problem here? Because when people are facing a problem, they come to someone and they are telling you what the solution should be. Can you do this for me? Okay, yeah, I can do that for you, but why do you want to do that? Yeah. When you start to really dig deeper, you realize it's not really what they thought the solution is. Solution is something different. When you get to the bottom of the problem, the root cause of the problem. So skills that we need to get to the bottom of the problem is where mostly us as humans, the people, the professionals involved in our careers, is where it's irreplaceable. When we really know what the problem is, you can use AI to build solutions, to build what's the most efficient solution for that problem at this point in time, within those limitations, within this budget, within these constraints, etc. How do you see it that way? Do you agree with that?
I think humans are ultimately always going to be irreplaceable aspect of the emotional intelligence that they bring to problem solving, and the ability, as you say, to connect to people, to understand the human connection to the problem. So I think to your point around being curious, being able to ask deeper questions, to be able to problem triage, problem identify, and then to your point, then how do we actually then solve that with or without technology? I think, though, even just coming back to an example with law, so one thing that a lot of legal practitioners that are doing at the moment is, why do you engage, I mean, not even just lawyers, but why do you engage someone who's been around for 25 years? Right? The simple answer is you want their years of cumulative experience.
Yes.
Now, we actually can replace that with technology now.
Sure.
As you say, you can feed in
Sure.
a lot of data. You can
Sure.
actually get, frankly, computers telling you smarter and quicker than a human can. What's missing is the validation. What's missing is, does this align with the human experience? Does this align with what you've seen it done in the past? And I think that's the part that you'll never replace. But if I had a tool that could tell me what was the last 70 advices that I gave on this topic, and how do I then get the tool to actually pull out for me the 5 or 6 different options very quickly, I can then use that as a superpower to be able to then have a more deeper conversation with my client about that. So instead of just delivering the advice over the table, you're actually then engaging more deeply with your client on the issue, as you say, and actually uncovering some things surface. So I think all of this is to say that you do need to.
Is it really useful to bring with you any of these solutions based on experiences that might have occurred in the past when you're in that mode of trying to understand the real problem? I think it might not be helpful. I think those skill sets of empathy and emotional intelligence that you talked about, and human skills and communication skills that you need to be able to really get to the root cause. No technology can help you with that. Technology can be even counterproductive in here.
And if you don't know how to interpret the results, it can actually give you the wrong answer. And you won't realize,
but
right?
Why should you be in the mode of interpreting results at this point when you're really trying to listen to someone while they are angry, they want to sue someone, they want to almost kill someone, etc. They hate someone, they want to sue them. This, for example, I was reading this book years and years ago about in the US, we seem to think, at least the world seems to think, that it's a suing culture. Everybody want to sue everybody. It's a big thing, suing people. I'll sue my doctor. I'll sue any professional for professional negligence. They interviewed about 1,000 people who sued their doctors over space of a few years.
Yep.
And the first 99% of the answer at a shallow level was based on what they really stated during the time when they, in the court documents, based on professional negligence. Because they hurt me when they were doing this. They left an instrument in my stomach or whatever it might be. I don't know if that was one of these cases, but you know what I mean?
Yeah.
But when they started to dig deeper,
yeah,
it came down to about 75% of the time,
yeah,
it wasn't the medical negligence. It was disrespect.
Disrespect, lack
They
of
weren't-
empathy, lack of care, lack of time, and giving me a chance to understand.
Have you been to a doctor who is really good at what they do? Well, probably that's wrong to say even that. How can they be good at what they do? Nevertheless, they seem to be competent or whatever, or at least the world, the neighborhood, wherever they operate, the suburb, they seem to think is a good doctor in their 50s, and you were even a 16-year-old. So you might look up to them and think, man, this guy has a lot of experience. You respect them in theory. Then as soon as you start to talk to them, they cut you halfway through. Open your mouth. You're talking. You try and tell them why you're here, why you're upset.
Yeah.
Open your mouth. Okay. They do it the first time. Then 2-3 minutes later, they ask you another question. Move your arm. They cut you off again.
Yeah.
What the F is that?
Yeah.
It came down to this kind of behavior.
Yeah.
Not listening to me, disrespected me, etc. 75% of the time. So what came of that? The way I learned from it was such a huge learning thing for me in customer service. So what happens is that customer will turn a blind eye if you're really nice and respectful. If you then make a mistake, they pretend it didn't happen.
Yeah.
If on the other hand, you've been working with them, they've had to work with you, they've had to deal with you for a while, and then they've been putting up with you because they've got no other choice and whatever, and you've been disrespectful and rude to them, and then you make a mistake. Oh my God, they want to sue you.
Yeah. Yeah.
They are waiting for that moment almost. It's like the reverse.
Yeah. And I think, and to your point, like the advice back to the 16-year-olds is it's the soft skills and the ability to relate to humans that's always going to be irreplaceable human experience perspective. And actually, even in the legal profession, it's a very, very similar tale. Most of the time that lawyers get sued, there are, of course, your fringe cases where they miss a deadline and something catastrophic happens because they just didn't do their job, right? But as you say, they've done a lot of research on this, and often they find it's didn't call me back for days.
Here you go.
Didn't, ask me, how am I actually feeling about the result or the process that we're trying to go through. Didn't actually try to understand where I was coming from. Just treated me like another case. Just treated me like another number. Just treated me like something that needed to be done. And that makes up the bulk of the complaints, even against lawyers.
But you can't sue them for that.
That's right.
When something goes wrong, that's really what made you sue them.
Exactly. Yeah. Yeah. And so I think, it's hard to teach soft skills. I think you have to just, and to the point that we actually started on, when I look back at my 12-year-old self, that's actually the thing that I connected with most it was that soft skill ability to talk or to train or to educate or to work with or to challenge or to, be curious or to question, all of those things that actually attracted me to what I do. Career. I think the other thing to think about is, there's no university that you can go to learn soft skills. A lot of universities.
I was going to ask you about that.
Yeah, I mean, they are trying to train it in a structured way. So, whether practicing client interviews or whether it's practicing negotiations, not necessarily to get the outcome, but to actually learn the process or experience, or what are the things that matter most. So, I think universities are going in a good direction there. But I mean, even today, like that's to your point, that's something that we really focus on in our team culture. How do we help them actually fill their tools in their toolkit beyond just being smart and beyond just knowing what they need?
Yeah. Very interesting. The second part will probably come back to your journey through becoming a lawyer, but maybe we continue in terms of your first exposure to commercial law and how you ended up with where you are now.
So I did a couple of rotations in different teams, as I mentioned. One of those was insurance law. And for those that don't understand insurance law, which is practically everybody, because until you actually do it, you realize there's this whole world out there that just focuses on this exact issue. Really, what you're doing is helping organizations that have had something go wrong. Now, my very first case was actually acting for the engineers that operated the Wivenhoe and Somerset dams. If you remember in 2011, the Queensland floods.
Yeah.
They let the water out in January and flooded Brisbane. And so the question for them was, were we negligent as engineers, as dam operators? And there was a big insurance company that fundamentally provided cover for those engineers if something went wrong. And that's where I got my introduction to learning all about dam operations. The very next day, I'll be working on a collapsed crane. The very next day, it might be, it was actually back in the day, it was a lot of the GFC work where you had the failed assets and people losing money. And so, a lot of the financial advisors were getting sued. So for me, the insurance law element of it was really to say, I get to work on something different every single day, and I get to help people who are just trying to do a hard day's work, and something goes wrong. So I think that to me was that social justice connection. But then within that, I had a look around and realized that I could, my career could go this way or that way. But I brought it back to what I really loved, which is at university, really studying the intersection between people, technology, privacy. You have to remember, this is back when iPhones had only just come out. Social media had only just come out. My Facebook had only launched the year prior. So we were in a world that was funny to think now that we thought then was new, and look how far we come in 15 years. So I decided in 2013 that I wanted to do something very different and focus on technology and cyber. I then was really lucky that I got to act for the internet service providers after the 2016 e-census failure. So if you remember, we all tried to log in and do the e-census in 2016, and then we couldn't log in.
Shut
the census down. So they got in a bit of trouble, and we ended up acting for the internet service providers that were engaged to prevent that from happening. I learned more about the internet and how the internet works than I care to ever know. And so then I realized this is it for me. I really love this intersection. I love kind of the intersection between, human mistakes, between technology, between cyber crime. It got me involved in criminal law again. So it kind of really ticked all the boxes for me.
Do you remember your first exposure to a cyber crime? How old were you? What were you doing when you go, oh my God, this thing happens? This thing now is a crime. There's a category of crimes out there that is done via cyber. When was your first time that you've cottoned on to that?
Through work. So I probably wasn't exposed to it personally. It was really seeing it in 2013, 2014. So, you saw a lot of breaches happening, or you saw a lot of cyber criminals that was really starting to come into the market in Australia. For me, it was the very first incident was actually a really interesting case. It was an IT provider who was meant to be the trusted person within the organization, but was very jaded, and ultimately, broke into the company's assets and misconfigured a whole bunch of systems and tried to do a whole bunch of different things. And I think for me, that was the first time that I realized just how technology dependent we all are as businesses, as individuals. So
and government
as well. They're not immune at all by any stretch. Actually, one of the first cool cases that I got to work on, I was, as I said, back in Norton Rose at the time, and there was a partner in Colorado. His name was David, and him and I got along really well. He took me under his wing and kind of taught me everything that he knew. But I remember having this moment where I won't say the name of the client, but it was a well-known retail outlet. If you went to the shops, you probably know who it is. Very similar thing. They had a cyber criminal hack into their systems and take a whole bunch of data globally. And I remember having to help them, deal with the police and deal with the notifications and deal with the regulators down here. And I think for me, I still have it printed out at home. It was the newspaper article talking about the story in Australia. And that was way back in 2014. So I still have that printed out to kind of remind me of, this is the benefit that I'm trying to help solve. So
you understand insurance so well. Why don't we see if we can benefit some people, some CEOs? Could be a small business, could be a big business, but it's their first time job as a CEO. What's the common misunderstanding that you believe CEOs have about the power and the importance of insurance for their business?
I think everybody has their own personal experience of insurance. It's probably a car insurance policy or a home insurance policy. You know, they've had a car crash and it's
Mm.
that again.
Mm.
I think the biggest misconception is people probably have their own personal experience of insurance and don't quite understand the world of insurance. So, you know, you might be thinking about that car insurance policy that you had if you had a car accident and it didn't quite work out for you. But in the business world, the insurance industry for your CEOs and corporate clients, this is an industry that fundamentally is there to keep the lights on for businesses. Their sole purpose is to take away risk, to take away things at night to allow you to turn up. You can't go to a restaurant today without that restaurant owner having probably 7 insurance policies to cover the employees, to cover if someone hurts themselves, cover food quality issues, cover, you know, floods and fire and theft, cybercrime. Without that insurance, we can't open up our doors and do business. We don't have the confidence of being able to actually step out into the world and do what we want to do. So I think first thing I'd say is,
so it's business continuity.
Business continuity.
In the event of something happens, you could lose the business because you won't be able to pay for the cost of that event, of the problem, of the issue. Yeah,
exactly. And I think we probably pass insurance off to, you know, a financial officer within the business, a CFO or a risk manager, as just get the policy done. But what you find when you engage with the insurance industry is this is a group of hundreds of thousands of people across Australia, across the world, who actually genuinely love working with businesses, genuinely love getting to know the people behind the computer screen. And
first time I heard that.
It's a massive industry out there. It's probably one of the most social, but also hardworking, problem-solving industries out there.
There's somehow, unfortunately, I mean, I love what you're saying, and I want to believe it, but there's really, unfortunately, bad reputation.
Yeah.
A bit like the car salesman, unfortunately, and I hope I'm not offending any awesome car salespeople there as well.
Or insurance.
Similar thing, you know, it's probably that 10-20% that ruin the image for everybody else.
Yeah.
Similar thing, right?
Yeah, totally. And look, in my world, in the kind of cyber insurance space, in the D&O, directors and officers, professional liability space, with the intersection of technology, it's the same battle that we're having, which is companies are thinking, I don't need cyber insurance. You know, if we had something wrong, they probably wouldn't even pay out. I'm dealing with 2 cyber criminals. I'm dealing with the cyber criminals in Russia. I'm dealing with the cyber criminals with the insurance industry. But actually, unlike any other product line, with cyber insurance, the insurance industry is there to actually stand shoulder to shoulder with you to actually try and reduce the risk factors of having an incident. And if something goes wrong, hold your hand and say, we're here with you. This isn't just a sheet of paper that sits under the desk. There are people here that genuinely want to stand shoulder to shoulder with you when this happens, to make sure that you feel supported and that you get a really good outcome. So an incredibly rewarding industry to work in. Absolutely love it.
So let me go back to this. We want to do two separate pieces of advice to a CEO when it comes to insurance, things that you've discovered that CEOs don't appreciate enough or understand enough. You want to send that message. 2 things. What would they be?
Don't treat it just like a transaction. Yes, you are buying an insurance policy and it costs money and it gives you a certain amount of, you know, financial reimbursement, but don't treat it as just a transaction. Get to know your broker, allow them to get to know your business. You'll actually find on a human level, and this comes back to this whole conversation, on a human level, they actually want to get to know you and they want to get to know your business. They're probably struggling to get more than 3 minutes of your time once a year to have a conversation about it. So engage more with your insurance broker, because you'll get a better result, and frankly, they'll want to work harder for you.
That's powerful, Reece.
Big time. And then the second thing is understand, everybody just inherently understands, you know, I get insurance for fire and theft and floods. That's all pretty standard, property losses, etc. But understand the more emerging risks that are happening. So in our space, cyber, but there's a whole bunch of other emerging risks that the insurance industry globally and here within Australia is trying to tackle. It could be anything from the latest emerging risk is even AI technology, or it could be, you know, the latest trends in greenwashing, which is people trying to market themselves as saying we're carbon neutral or we care about the environment, but then actually not backing that up, and you know, some issues around that. So the insurance industry is actually always one step ahead of the game. They're trying to see what the next risk area is and how do they help organizations become more resilient.
Who on hell is going to give any insurance to ChatGPT when it comes to giving the wrong advice to people about all kind of things, about things that you cannot even control the kind of subject. So when you look
Yeah.
at the 360 possibilities of all the different advice that people will come to ChatGPT for,
Yeah.
how can you even perceive all that
Yeah.
for you to be able to put some kind of understand that risk profile and be able to put some kind of value to that and say to ChatGPT, okay, it's $10 million a year or $1 billion a year.
Yeah.
How do they have insurance? Do you know?
I very much doubt ChatGPT would in relation to the advice that's given, but I think it's an
But they're
interesting.
charging money for it now.
Yeah, well, this is
So
it,
what
right?
do they have some kind of terms that says we will never ever indemnify you for anything? You're on your own. We're taking no responsibility for. Is that probably what they're doing?
Probably, or
Yeah.
no responsibility. But I think
Yeah.
that might be a bit too hot to touch at the moment. But a lot of insurers, to come back to the risk point, um, emerging risks. So I think there will be a policy around AI liability or AI induced or technology induced liability in respect of advice or in respect of anything else. But again, where insurers come in is they'll say, okay, we've got a policy if things go wrong. We're not sitting here waiting for a claim. We want to help you treat this. We want to help you mitigate this. What are the controls that we need to put in place? What's the education that we need to put in place? What's the contractual limitations and liability that we need to help in place? And I know we keep answering the question a few different ways, but that's where the value of insurance, which is this global behemoth of risk treaters, comes in to say, hey, they're actually an asset. And they see things globally. So we in Australia are early adopters of technology here. And most startups will start in Australia and then try to very quickly launch in the UK and US, much bigger markets than. But we don't have all the answers. I mean, nobody does, frankly.
Okay.
But we don't have all the answers. So why not leverage what the US are doing? Why not leverage what the UK are doing? Why not leverage what parts of Asia are doing? Why not leverage what parts of the Middle East are doing?
Okay.
That's where you get the benefit.
Okay. Can you unpack a little bit the layers of that industry? I still don't understand it because you hear about the broker, the actual insurer, whatever that means. I'll let you use the right words, but this is my own understanding. And then I happen to know a good friend of mine who's reports to the CTO to the largest insurer in this country. And he was talking about some entity in Switzerland that you don't even hear about that's buys the debt or the insurance risk or whatever. Can you unpack the layers of this industry? When I go and get an insurance, the chances are, what are those layers?
Who you're dealing with?
Yeah.
So most of your clients are probably comfortable understanding that they've got an insurance broker. So somebody who understands the insurance industry, who understands the products, who can try and sell and recommend and talk to you about different products. But that's probably the face of the insurance industry.
Sure.
The brokers then will then engage with the insurer. So when we say the insurer, there's multiple roles within the insurer. There's going to be the underwriter, which is the person who sits behind the computer and says, tell me a bit more about the business, their operations, these factors, their revenue, their locations, what they do. Are they in manufacturing? Are they in technology? Are they in law? What do they do? And then they will try and understand how to then price the risk and ultimately sell the policy relevant to that risk. So that's the underwriter. That's who typically your broker deals with.
But that underwriter is working for the insurer. Is
That's
that
right.
so you've got the broker and the insurer,
Yep.
the company, the insurer company. Yeah.
And then you've got, within the insurer, you've then got a claims team, or you've got somebody that sits there, doesn't sell the policy. They're then actually, responding to when something goes wrong and trying to help you actually pay out the claim and deal with it on that side. And then that's pretty much the chain in the main part. But then to your point, then you'll have a whole bunch of actuaries that sit behind that whole team, and they use technology and algorithms and different things to try and risk model likely outcomes. But then to your question earlier, what your friend is probably in the reinsurance industry. So all of the insurers will sit there and say, we have billions of dollars of capital at risk. We want to better mitigate our own exposure if something goes wrong.
That's the one I'm talking
So then
about.
we sell part of our risk to a reinsurer
Yes.
who sits right above everybody and says, I'm now taking on global risk, taking on parts of global risk.
Okay.
And it all goes through to ultimately.
So we have a broker that will understand the problem that we're trying to solve, what we're trying to insure, what we do, etc. Then they go, okay, we recommend this insurance company for you. That insurance company, I'll come back to that. Thank you for trying to explain the different roles there. That's really awesome. We'll come back to it. But nevertheless, so far you've got two companies we've dealt with so far, the broker and the actual insuring company, the insurer, right? Then that point I was saying is that insurance company, it's taken on all that risk. They probably put a value to the risk. Like, for example, if I'm a client, they value this risk at, I don't know, $1 million a year or $200,000 a year or whatever, right?
Mm-hmm.
And then they go to some company somewhere and they say, look, we've got this particular part of our business, maybe the cyber or maybe the real estate or whatever.
A lot of the time it could be property, or it could be weather events, it could be floods, or it could be
Sure.
other weather events.
Sure. So that's a category. And they go, this part of our business is worth about $1 billion a year. We want to, what's the word here? Reinsure that?
Yeah, reinsure.
That's the reinsurance, right? We want to reinsure that. So $1 billion worth of reinsurance, they might then pay that reinsurance company, I don't know, maybe $10-20 million a year for that.
Yep.
Wow.
And when you look at the chain of that supply chain, questions that the reinsurer is asking the insurer at an aggregate level,
yeah,
we're obviously looking at a much broader systemic kind of book or risk.
Yes.
Aren't that different to what the broker's asking for business?
No.
It's what are the controls in place? What do we think the key issues are, and what are the factors that are going to contribute to that? What are you doing to try and mitigate that, not just within your business, but within the ultimate businesses that you're insuring?
But they won't be able to go into the detail of every case. The insurer will have to ask the questions for every business and stuff. As you said, the relationship between insurer and insurer, it's more of a high-level trends.
Aggregate level, yeah. So they tend to look at things like systemic risk. So you might say, for example...
Maybe they want to look, sorry, Reece, but to explain your point, and thank you for bringing it up. So maybe they want to understand, okay, so in that flood a part of your risk that you're trying to reinsure, show me the questionnaire that you've been asking for the last 12 months. For all those clients that you have, do you have a common, they want to see how much details you're digging, regardless to going through every single little answer. They want to see how much due diligence that you're doing, perhaps.
Exactly.
And they make the assessment on that basis, perhaps.
Yep. And also how we're using data outside of the question and answer process to support and validate your risk modeling. So, for example, if you are insuring, an area within a flood zone or a floodplain or somewhere where they've experienced weather events, more frequently than one in 100 years, how are you pricing that? How are you managing the exposure?
Okay.
So it becomes a risk mitigation exercise.
Yes.
And this, I guess we're kind of coming around this topic multiple ways, but this is why the insurance industry itself, this is what I fell in love with, which is you actually have this whole industry here where the world wouldn't actually turn without the insurance industry spinning it. It's how we as business people, how we as consumers are able to have that confidence.
See, that point, it's so amazing. I really respect you for saying it the way you say it, but not many people understand the world that way. Even myself.
Yeah.
I am a CEO of a company. We've been operating for so many years and we've been very successful. I never saw it that way. I see the insurer almost, I want to say enemies, I'm going over the top here, but not necessarily your friends, not necessarily someone you want to have a conversation with in terms of you're careful what you tell them. You're encouraging me to really have conversation with these guys.
Yeah.
Because it's a product. You can customize that product almost, right? Is that what you're saying?
And look, you're not going to get a CEO realistically go and sit there and talk to an insurer for 5 hours, unless it's a big corporate that wants to understand risk and have that conversation. But for most of your clients, your small businesses, your medium enterprises, that's why you get a broker, because you rely on them to have that relationship, rely on them to have that expertise. But as I say, from a personal level, when we have market events or social events or client events, you literally have people that are just like us, all out there, all talking to each other, all having a really interactive time with each other, but fundamentally wrapped around a common purpose. In my world, it's how do we stop entities have cyber attacks and how do we respond if they get hit?
Yeah.
That's very one small part of the overall picture.
Oh, you can use your own words, because I really love the way you explain it, but what you're saying is something along the line of insurance allows us to do what we want to do, to keep the doors open for all these businesses, lights on for those businesses, be able to do the things that we want to do in life. And can you just explain that and why, why a common person doesn't see it that way?
Yeah. And again, it comes back to your misconception, right? About, your predispositions to insurance or the insurance industry. To be frank, the news headlines don't help because there's often a lot of, insurance doesn't pay when they talk about the one claim in 1,000 that gets denied when actually, there's 999 that do get paid out.
Yeah.
We deal with a lot of, startups and small businesses that are trying to, particularly technology companies that are trying to make a break and, develop a product and launch in Australia and then expand into the world. One thing I've noticed a lot recently, just to answer your question and bring home the point, is when you're a startup or a small business trying to ultimately sell your products to, usually larger institutions with a bigger reputation, a lower tolerance for risk, a reputation to manage. One of the best things that we're seeing startups get from a validation perspective is if they can get, say, cyber insurance, it means that that larger customer of theirs can have confidence that an independent industry as big as, if not frankly bigger than them, with less risk tolerance than them, with more ability to triage, treat and assess risk than them, if they can give that confidence and say, yep, we've given a tick of approval, this startup company has cyber insurance, you can rely on them, that allows them to walk into the boardroom and say, hey, I know it's only one indicator, I'm going to sell my product to you over here, I'm going to tell you how good we are over here, but just for your own due diligence, we've been vetted against this insurance industry and they've given us that tick of approval. So that's probably in my
tick of approval. You mean the fact that they've insured us? Is that what you mean by tick of approval? Or
we've got cyber insurance, and they've frankly tested our systems. They've pen tested our systems. They've gone to town to make sure that they're comfortable with us.
Absolutely,
and therefore you should be too.
Absolutely, to for us, it's critical.
Yeah,
a lot of 90% of our clients would demand to see a current cyber insurance policy and professional indemnities and a blah, blah, blah. They want to see all the policies and 100%. Or just making sure what you meant by the tick of approval.
No, that's exactly
clearly when they insure you, that means that's a tick of approval. I'm just making sure that's what you meant.
I think what I'm picking up on this is because people don't understand the dynamic and the process that sits behind this industry.
Yeah.
It's probably a missed opportunity to really then engage with, okay, so if I have a startup customer that wants to, do work with me and they've got those ticks of approval, now you understand what those ticks of approval actually mean. Now you understand the 100 hours that have gone into getting that tick of approval. Now you understand kind of what it actually stands for.
My experience with the insurance company that I've dealt with, or companies I've dealt with since I've been a CEO of this company, have been the most pleasant and most professional. Why the hell so much negative connotation about the insurance industry? When did that happen? Do you know? Did you ever? I know you're not that old to understand the history of Australia, but did you ever research that? Is there any stats about that? When did that start? Did something happen maybe in the 60s or 70s or 80s? They're perceived to be hungry, money-making scammers or something. Like, my gosh, but that's not my experience.
I think like everything in this world, there's always the one, bad apple that spoils the bunch. And, don't get me wrong, no industry is perfect, and the insurance industry has had its moments in decades gone by. But bringing this right back to kind of career conversations, we kind of started off with law, but now we're talking about insurance. I mean, this is the point is when you're 16 years old, frankly, when you're 25 years old finishing university, so many options out there that you're just not aware of until you have that inquiring mind and start to talk to people to understand how they got to where they are. And this is just one very small example of that.
Very interesting. Very interesting. Really enlightening. Thank you, man. Okay. So in terms of what you do right now, your the business that you're in, how did you end up where you are? Is that some kind of, you see that in the law? I don't understand the structure. I did a podcast with Daniel, an awesome corporate lawyer, and he explained to me the difference between when you're setting up a business, between doing a company versus a partnership model. Is that where it starts? Is that most of the law firms are set up the way they're set up as partnerships? Is that what it is?
Traditionally, he probably, I haven't listened to his podcast, but he probably talked about the different options in terms of how you structure it. Most law firms are partnerships. It's a very kind of traditional way of setting up a law firm. The more modern law firms these days are setting up what they call incorporated legal practices. So it's a company, but you're operating as a law firm. And fundamentally the difference is it gives you flexibility as an incorporated legal practice to bolt on and bolt off different areas, and also gives you flexibility to bolt on quasi-legal or perhaps non-legal consulting arms as well, because we're seeing quite a lot of that in our market at the moment.
Okay.
Lawyers joining with cyber people, or lawyers joining with corporate people that kind of have business experience. So that's the different options there.
And the company you're at right now, you're about 65 professionals based in Sydney. Is there some kind of franchise or how? What's the sort of the setup or?
Yeah, so we're at Clyde Co at the moment. Within the global firm that is Clyde Co, our team is 65 people. We focus on technology, privacy, data, and digital law risk. We help clients at the readiness phase, which is, before an incident happens, how do we get you prepared, or indeed, how do we try to help you mitigate the risk through training or through policies or through privacy work? The incident response piece is the biggest part of the team, and that's helping organizations when things go wrong. And then we've got the recovery side, which is more your traditional lawyering. That's, defending claims, privacy breach investigations, bringing recovery actions against wrongdoers, that more traditional lawyering, but with a technology lens. Yeah.
Did you work at all in corporate law, as in company law, as in shareholder agreements and things like that, advising entrepreneurs who are trying to raise capital to how to structure shareholder agreements to be favorite for them and to be able to protect their rights and what they want to do? Did you get involved in things like that, or not yet?
Not personally in my career. I do have a lot of mates that went down that route, either in private M&A or public M&A, so helping organizations buy and sell and get access to capital. We kind of touch on it here and there, particularly when we have customers that come to us. And for example, I'll give you a really clear example actually where it does come up is we often have organizations come to us and say, hey, if we need to pay a ransom payment, can you help us understand what the issues are? And ironically, to your point that you're talking about before, it's about asking the question before you come to the solution, right? And when you dig beneath that, what you realize is what they're actually asking for is, we've got a board and perhaps a private equity funder that owns us. We want to make sure that either the equity owners, or indeed the board, or a subset of the board, or perhaps a special group of people within the board are actually the ones making the decision about paying a ransom. And so when you start to dig below, it's not actually what's your advice on can we or can we not pay a ransom. It's actually how do we structure ourselves as a leadership group to ensure that if that occurs, we can efficiently and intelligently make a decision in the best interest of the company. And to your point, actually then the work product is
interesting.
Yeah, then the work product actually ends up becoming about delegations of authority as opposed to a ransomware decision-making framework. So,
yeah. Interesting. So at the moment in your firm, 2 partners, how many partners?
Yeah, so in our team, we've actually got 6 partners.
6 partners, okay.
So we kind of spread across that readiness, response, recovery in Australia and New Zealand. So
partner is, what's the difference between a partner and a shareholder or a director?
It's very similar.
Same?
Very, very similar.
Sure.
Yeah, essentially.
Sure. More like a director, yeah?
That's right. Yeah, exactly.
A director and a shareholder at the same time.
Exactly. Yeah.
Okay. So not much of a difference there. And you would have a shareholder agreement or constitution, sort of manual or whatever, that talks in details about the decision making and all that stuff.
The rights, your responsibilities, your ability to participate in material decisions, and
and what would be like when it comes to, that's interesting. Just from my knowledge only about company law, the difference between, let's say, if a shareholder or at the moment want to sell their shares, for example, we've got clause about offering those shares to. The right of first refusal, for example. Is it similar in your case as well?
Yeah, partnership.
You would do it that way?
Partnership, without kind of talking about our specific partnership.
Yeah, no, in general, the partnership model. Yeah.
The partnership model is probably, this is what makes it a bit more unique to, say, a normal company.
Yeah.
All things considered, you've got all the same things that companies need. You've got governance frameworks, you've got policies, you've got all the different things that kind of operate to enable the partnership, the leadership team to actually make decisions. But behind it, it's essentially you get promoted into the partnership. You need to be kind of supported by other partners, usually a managing partner or a senior partner, and then you get promoted into the partnership.
I mean, it's a big deal. You're becoming a shareholder. How do you get promoted simply like that?
You get voted in.
I've never seen an employee all of a sudden someone says, now you're going to get given 10% of the company. That's never happened, right?
Yeah.
So how does that work?
It is slightly unique, but ultimately feels and looks the same. So ultimately, you have to apply, you have to prove your credentials, you have to go through an application process, an interview process. There's a bunch of things you need to satisfy,
But
not just from a
clearly
due diligence perspective, but also for your own validation. You want to know that if you're going to, go into partnership, that that you yourself are ready and capable and ready for the task. But fundamentally, it comes down to a vote. So you need to, and depending on the partnership need, but you need to have the support of your peers.
And literally, like shareholders, at the end of the year, you guys decide if any profit is going to be distributed, and then it gets split evenly, etc. No difference to
look,
shareholders.
every partnership is slightly different, but conceptually, you ride the highs and you ride the lows. And, just like any business owner,
just like shareholders.
Exactly.
I'm just saying. Okay, very, very interesting. And you hear about this kind of language as well in accounting firms. As well, just for people that, just like myself, get a bit confused. And we also hear about things like, maybe if you can shed some light on that, I have a feeling you would know about this more than me. In the top four, you say accounting firms, the partner or whatever, it's like a franchise almost. They run their own kind of business, and yet they are operating under the power of the brand and the marketing power of that brand, and it's similar to, at high level, like a franchise. Can you shed some light on that?
Yeah, and I think the general theme of this was kind of career advice, right? So to a younger lawyer or engineer or accountant, because a lot of those professional services operate under partnership models. The most rewarding part about one of the most rewarding parts about being a partner is you get the benefit of running your own business within a broader business. So you get all the support, you get all the IT, you get the branding, you get the HR, you get kind of all of that. You get the benefit of the brand of the firm. So it's not just your personal name. You get to rely upon the brand to help you carry your name. But ultimately, you're running your own team, with your own profit and loss and all the rest of it.
Typically a particular specialization or a region.
Exactly.
Right?
That's right.
So you're right.
You may operate... you may have the same practice as 10 other partners at the firm, but it's all agreed that you're the expert that does that in Sydney, or you're the expert that does that in Auckland. Or, as you say, it might be a specialism. So you might be the only person that does cyber, but you do it across multiple jurisdictions.
Sure. Very interesting. Thank you for clarifying all that. Very good. Okay. So in terms of your experience so far, if there's one thing you want to share that you feel is interesting, that you would like, in general, anybody in Australia to be aware of, or people in, as I said, young people want to enter the legal industry, what would that be?
I just think never stop asking questions, because, we all know it. As you get older, the more you learn, the realize the less you know. And I know that's a bit of a cliche, but it's so true. And I think particularly over the next 10 years, like, we are going to see more change in the next 10 years than I think, we've experienced even in, 38 years of being alive on this world. I just really think never stop being curious, never stop asking questions, never stop, going outside your sphere of influence or whatever it is that you do day to day, because there's a big world out there. There's so many opportunities out there, and we are all probably going to have 5, 6, 7 careers in our total career. And don't get stuck. If you come back to your very first question, which is, what did you knew you wanted to be a lawyer. Okay, fine. You did that. But I wanted to be a criminal lawyer, and then I wanted to be an insurance lawyer, and then I wanted to be a technology lawyer. And, in 10 years' time, I'll probably be doing something slightly different again.
Yeah, okay. So what are you saying here?
Growth mindset for sure. Like, that's...
Okay.
That's what I think differentiates, the next generation, is being able to actually really, truly open your mind up to continuous learning, continuous growth.
Yeah, thank you. That's definitely good advice. Okay, and you said that you do some volunteering work and stuff like that. Do you recommend that? Is that something part of your satisfaction as a human being? To feel that you're engaged and makes you whole in a sense. Is that how you see what that volunteering work that you do?
I think anyone in this country who are not limited to being a lawyer, but I think anyone in this country who's fortunate enough to have an education, who's fortunate enough to get a rewarding job, we are the lucky, and remembering that not everybody has that opportunity. And so I think through volunteering, whether it's in a professional capacity or closer to home, for me, I volunteer as a lifesaver down at Maroubra Beach. Partly because I want to make sure I get on the beach once a month and get to give back that way. But also, you know, you're also hanging out with 16-year-olds who have never really had a job before, and suddenly you're working with them and, you know, teaching them all about leadership and community engagement. So for me, that's personally what I do. And I think, you know, I've got young kids, you know, 5 and 2. And I just like the idea that I can role model that for them, and you know, they can see that too. So yeah, big community engagement, big time. It's a it's a small part of the overall time commitment in my life, but it's a big part of what makes me. So yeah,
that's amazing. Look, on this note, let's maybe leave it at that. That was an amazing conversation. Thank you very much, Reece.
Thanks for having me, Anwar.
Appreciate you, man.
Yeah.
And thank you very much, everybody, and we'll talk to you soon.
Cool. Thanks, Anwar.
Cheers, man.